What is up, enthusiasts? It is Cedar Flags here, and welcome back to another one of my videos. Since the beginning of time, coaster enthusiasts have fought and argued on which is better, the front row or the back row. You have that select group of people that likes to go in the front row of most roller coasters, but then you have those people that long for the back rows of roller coasters. They definitely both have pros and cons to each of them, which is why I'm dedicating this whole video to the front rows and back rows of roller coasters. With the exceptions of some magic seats on some rides, the front and back rows are the two most popular on the roller coaster. So today, they are going head to head. Which one is better, the front row or the back row? Well, we are going to figure out here on Cedar Flags. Before I start this, it's important to know that the front and the back rows are completely different experiences. In fact, ride designers measure G-force by the middle of the train. So when you see G-force on a roller coaster in the statistics, that is based off the middle of the train. It could be more or less depending on where you sit if it's not in the middle of the train. So it is important to choose what row you sit in on a ride so you could have the best experience possible. And note that everything I'm saying here isn't true for every roller coaster, just the vast majority of them. So we are going to start off with the front row. We are going to look at the advantages of sitting in both the front and back row, and of course we are starting off with the front row. And the first perk I want to talk about is that there is nothing in front of you. This one is a deal breaker for many. This is a pretty important factor and probably the most important one for the front row. Nothing in front of you means that there is no one in front of you, so you could see perfectly throughout the entire course of the track. This is the most similar experience to what you would see in a POV, and it is very important that people get a front row ride on a roller coaster. This may go hand in hand with perk number 1, but perk number 2 is that it feels much faster. Now, this is probably just because there's nothing in front of you and you could see the track zooming past you, but at the same time, the back of the train definitely adds onto the speed, so you could easily feel like you're zooming past at top speed. The third perk is something you might have not thought about. It is that you will be going faster over those smaller bunny hills and speed bumps just because you are the first car to reach that hill and you are reaching it at full speed. By the time the back car has reached the crest of a small hill, the train has slowed down enough so it won't be the full experience. Now, this doesn't apply for bigger hills, this just applies for the smaller bunny hills that don't lose a lot of speed going up. The final perk I want to talk about here is that while going on a double up, this will easily be the most intense row. This is just because the train will have slowed down significantly by the time the back row has reached the crest of the first hill on a double up, just because it is a double up and the train keeps going up and losing speed, so the front row is easily the best row when it comes to a double up. Now, there are many things to take away from this. The first thing is that the view is the main selling point for the front row. That's why everyone waits in the front row, and that will cause longer lines, which is pretty noticeable. But this is why most people want to ride in the front row. They get the full ride experience at its full potential. At least when it comes to the view of the ride. It's definitely nowhere near as intense as the alternative, but we'll get to that in a little bit. Now, if you're one for the view of the ride, the front row will always be the pick for you and definitely the one that wins the video. But at the same time, if you long for intensity, the front row may not be the one for you. But if you want to have the best experience on a ride, the rides that you should ride in the front row are easily the ones with the smaller elements. Think of the older wooden coasters with sharp bunny hills, or some of the smaller RMCs or GCIs out there. This is because that the smaller hills will provide more intensity in the front row, as opposed to the back. Look at a ride like Phoenix at Knoebels. A lot of people say it's pretty good in the back, but it's much better in the front because you hit those tiny hills head on. You get the most intense experience and the most out of your seat experience. Now we get to the back row. The back row is a much more intense row, and I will get to why that is. So we are of course going to start with the perks of the back row. The back row perk that I feel like is the most important is that there is more airtime in general. When you're on those long drawn out camelbacks on some bigger RMCs or B&Ms, you will get more airtime in the back than you will in the front. You will also get more intense airtime on these bigger hills. This is because the front of the train will be dragging you down the other side of the hill, so you'll be going much faster than the average speed as it is supposed to go. This is definitely prevalent on the bigger B&M hyper models. Now when you're in the front row, you'll get some mild floater on some of those bigger hills, but in the back row, you might get some good ejector if it's on the right time of day. The second perk is kind of similar to the first, but focusing on the first drop. The first drop is much more intense in the back row than it is in the front, and it may be a very drastic difference. In fact, it might be a whole other airtime moment within itself if you sit in a different row. And this comes from personal experience too. Two of the coasters that I've ridden with the biggest difference are Maverick and Skyrush. In the front row, these two first drops are incredible, but these first drops in the back row are out of this world experiences, and they feel like you are being ejected out of your seat in the back. The third perk goes in line with one in the front row. Now this is talking about the double downs of the ride. Now I talked about double ups with the front row, double downs are more intense in the back, and this is the same reason of the first drop. It will be much more intense because the gravity of the rest of the train is dragging you down. Something I haven't even talked about is that there are more positive Gs on inversions as well. When you're going up a long drawn out inversion, if you sit in the back, you will get dragged over that inversion for the same reason as you get dragged over the bigger hills and first drops. The fifth perk is something you might have not thought about either. It is that the ride in the back row will always have a shorter line. Now looking at some of the rides, it's a lot more drastic than others. Look at a ride like Skyrush at Hershey Park or Millennium Force at Cedar Point. These rides always have extremely long waits for the front row, sometimes even different lines entirely. Now, in the back row, it will almost be a walk-on, and that is a great experience if you are a back row rider. That's why I choose the back row when I'm on a time-efficient schedule. Rides that are better in the back row are usually the ones that are more long drawn out with bigger elements, such as the B&M Hypers or Intamin Hypers, or rides with pretty intense first drops. This is because you'll get a much more intense experience. Now finally, we have come down to the verdict. We are going to choose which is the better row in my personal opinion. Now in my personal opinion, I think the best row is the back row. Now this is just because I do prefer intensity over a good view, and intensity is absolutely where it's at for me. So I definitely choose the back row, but let me know what you guys choose in the comments. Let me know down in the comments what you like better, and it definitely varies on roller coasters. So maybe tell me what you think of is a magic seat on some rides. This is Cedar Flags, and I will see you all later.